Here we are now with another episode of the Andrew Lake Podcast. If you are a regular listener of the Andrew Lake Podcast, please share your favorite episode, as this will help me find my audience. It will help to find the people who are ready to hear what we are talking about here. And today I'd like to share a meditation with you. It's a little bit active and a little bit raunchy, a little bit crude, and this is an advanced meditation. So if you are a beginner, this is not for you. If this is your first introduction to meditation or active meditations or awareness techniques or any of this stuff, this is not for you. You need to have some sort of basics down first. This technique today, we're calling here Forced Arousal Meditation. Now, as we explain it, as things unfold, you'll understand why it's an advanced technique, how it works, and we're going to discuss all the different parameters. Make sure you understand all the different parts because you don't want to get this one wrong. You want to make sure that you actually understand all the ins and the outs so that when you do go to do it, you're not heading off in the wrong direction. So we've talked about this in a number of different ways. We have actually come at this with different techniques, such as breathing techniques and different awareness techniques and different meditative techniques. And this is just another tool. It's a powerful tool, very powerful tool, which we're giving to you here today. We're giving to you now. And it does have different forms. It does take its manifestation in different ways. It manifests itself in different ways, depending on how you see it as a meditation. So today, we're using it as a forced active meditation. Now, for another example of one of these, you might want to listen to my explanation of forced smile meditation. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of that one here because you can listen to that conversation. But in principle, what you do in forced smile meditation is you sit down and you force yourself to smile. No matter what you're thinking, no matter what you're feeling, you force those lips, the sides of the lips, up into the cheeks, non-stop, no matter what. And there are different parameters to that. There are different things to expect, so you can go and listen to that conversation. But that idea of taking one small thing in your phenomenological experience and putting a forcing resolve onto it, or saying you have to do this, is the principle that you need to understand for forced arousal meditation. Now, this is a bit of a boys' meditation. Generally speaking, it's more for the boys than the girls, but it can be done with the girls, can be done for the girls. And if you have sexual frustration, if you have problems with your sexual energies, your sexual fantasies, if you have mind fucking, if you have any number of hang-ups around your sexuality, this is a great meditation for you. And there are also many other conversations that we've talked about which contain solutions, well, not necessarily solutions, but methods for sexual energies, including breathing techniques. I've got a whole series on breathing techniques, and one of the episodes in there is to do with masturbation, and also there's a lot on sexuality in that series. So that series is called Learning to Breathe. So go back and listen to that if you want to know more about breathing techniques and sexuality. Now, to say a little bit more about why the technique we're sharing with you here today is advanced, it's a kind of, I'm calling it resolve that you have to have. It's this thing which is the muscle within you that holds yourself to something. You can think of it like a muscle. When you sit down and you say, I'm going to do this for 20 minutes non-stop, then that is the thing that becomes strong when you practice it. That is the thing that actually translates into other things. It's your kind of autonomy. It's your kind of, well, it's your resolve. It's your will. And that needs to be developed to a certain amount. Now, doing this meditation, forced arousal meditation, does actually build that. But because we're dealing with sexuality, because we're dealing with the mind and actually a very, we should say, I want to say prehistoric, but it's not prehistoric, a very reptilian part of the mind, let's say that, which is the visual component of the mind, it's going to take a lot of guts. It's going to take a lot of strength. So you need that will muscle to be well and truly sharpened for this meditation. Now, more generally in your sexuality, if you are watching porn, if you are masturbating, if you're wanking on a regular basis, this meditation is also not for you. This has to be done as a later stage process for integrating sexuality. If you are having images go into your eyes of pornographic acts on the screen, then you first need to stop that. You first need to go through a dry period. And if you're jerking off, if you're wanking on a regular basis, you also need to stop that. Now, we have talked about that also in the past at quite a bit of length. So this is not a down thing on anything wrong with jerking off. There's nothing wrong with jerking off. All we're talking about here is what you want to do if you want to be achieving certain things in your meditative practices, in your spiritual progress. So nothing wrong with jerking off. It's just that if you want to be doing these things, you do have to have a period of not jerking off, preferably 90 days. 90 days, no porn, no masturbation. And that's a minimum. You really should be going for something like 200 days. And if you combine that with your daily meditation practice, just an ABC sort of meditation practice, might be silent sitting or do nothing or watching the breath or counting breaths, these sorts of things, then you're really going to be on the way for actually dealing with some deep stuff, which is what this technique is for. This is forced arousal meditation. Now, if you feel like I haven't said too much about the difference between boys and girls, then that's okay. Maybe that will become clear as we keep talking. And now for the actual technique itself. It is actually what it seems to be. If you've followed me this far and you've understood all that I've said and explained so far, then you pretty much already know what the technique is. It's forced arousal meditation. So, like all meditations, you have your timer. You sit down, you set your timer. This one can be 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Probably you don't want to stretch it any longer than that. It's quite a short-term thing. If you really want to go deep, like really deep, then go for an hour. That would be quite intense. That would be quite a heavy dosage of this meditation. Set your timer, close your eyes, sit down, and then what you do is you do anything it takes to become aroused. So if you're a guy, that means you need to get an erection. You need to get a hard-on. And you need to actually, best case, or the advice here is to actually take it out. Actually have it out of your pants. Have plenty of space around. Or you could do this meditation naked. So long as you're home alone and you're comfortable and there's no one around, doesn't matter. I mean, you should be meditating in private anyway. So it doesn't matter that you're naked. So you sit down, you're naked or you've got it out, and then whatever it takes, you keep that thing up in the air. Now, this is where you're confronting your sexual fantasies, you're confronting your mind fucking, you're confronting your sexually perverted imagery that you've got, your reptilian brain, And you're actually working with some really deep stuff. You're working with some really deep energy. Now, if you try this and you haven't got meditative experience and you haven't had some time without masturbation, then it's not going to work for you. It's not going to be something that you're actually able to work with, because you're going to want to just jerk off and you're not going to have the stamina or the self-control to actually watch and wait and see it through, to actually see it out and go through the process. And that's why this is an advanced technique. It's tricky. It is tricky. And to really force yourself to keep it up, what you do is you go into your sexual fantasies and you allow yourself anything. You be as raunchy as you can. You do whatever. You be perverted. You just think up anything and you be really graphic, really over the top. And what you're doing when you do this is you're going in consciously to something that is unconscious. Normally, your sexual fantasies have you. You don't have them. When they are around you, when they are on you, when they are upon you, they are captivating, like you're in a movie and you're lost in the movie. Now, what we're doing with this technique is it's like you're sitting in the movie theater and someone's tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, you're just in a movie theater. And that thing that's tapping you on the shoulder and sitting behind you is actually your muscle, which is going into these sexual fantasies consciously. So now you can see why it's so important to have at least a little bit of strength going into this. Now, if you're a guy, keep it pointed in the air. Keep it up. almost like forced smile meditation is keep the sides of your cheek up. Well, there's a great pun here, which is keep it up in forced arousal meditation. Right? And in that way, it's actually very clear when you're actually succeeding with this, when you're actually doing this. Now, for the ladies, you actually become moist. You actually become warm down there. Yeah, so you can see how it's a little bit more tricky to understand, it's a little bit more tricky to really see how it's going on. Now, to say a little bit more, of course, about why it's more of a boy's thing than a girl's thing is, well, testosterone has that sexual aggression. It's testosterone that is fueling aggression and that sort of harsh, crude sexuality. It's that misguided testosterone that's behind all the sexual fantasies. And girls, generally speaking, of course I'm talking generally, don't have as much of that kind of mind-fucking going on. Now, that is not to say, do not equate this with that boys have more sex drive than girls. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm talking about the essence of different kinds of energies, such as testosterone and estrogen, and how it relates to the mind, how that relates to how we think about things. So don't take this as, oh, this means guys are just horny guys and girls are these perfect princesses that sit around waiting to be get off being aggressive or have someone be aggressive towards them. That's not the case. That's not what we're saying at all. And in some ways, actually, women have different pulls. They have a drive to bear children, which is even more deep in some ways than testosterone. It's got its own kind of longing, and it's different. It's different to testosterone. It's very difficult to sort of equate the experiential differences of different biological processes. Do you get that? Do you get that that's what we're doing here? We've got biological components within the body, the biology, which is your cells, your blood, your chemicals, and that relating to subjective experience, your personal experience. And in fact, that's exactly what you're trying to get in touch with. And that's in fact what you're trying to rewire. with this forced arousal meditation, because what you're doing is you're turning it upside down. Because normally what happens is you have some external stimuli, such as you see a pretty girl or you see some porn, and then a biological process happens. Some testosterone comes. And that leads to the mental images. That leads to behaviors. That leads to more thinking, more wanting, more desire. And there's also habituation all thrown into it. Now here what we're doing is we're doing it the opposite way. We start with the mental image and no external stimuli. And then comes the biological process. So you sit with your eyes closed and you imagine the most incredible, whatever sexual fantasies get you off, and really explore it. And that's the mental sphere. That's the mind sphere, the noosphere. And be visual with it. That's one of the keys. You don't need sounds. You don't need dialogue. You need the vision. It's a picture. So imagine yourself in a place. Now, I'm not going to turn this into a guided meditation. There's no guided meditation for this version of the meditation. I could guide you in there, but that would be a little bit weird for both you and me. So let's not go there, but do it for yourself. Understand the principle though, right? Visual, mental first, then comes the biological process. Now, just as we did with the forced smile meditation, we'll set a challenge for this one. So forced smile meditation, we said you do 20 minutes a day, every day for a week. So do the same with this one. For 20 minutes a day, every day for a week, sit down and do your mind fucking. Do it consciously and see what it takes, see what happens. Now, as you're experimenting with this, remember that in meditation, there are textbook things to look out for, and there are also the things that you find for yourself. Now, with this one, I'm really just explaining the first steps of the process, and you have to go off on your own to figure it out for yourself. There will be times when it's very difficult for you to become aroused. There'll be times when you'll get tired of the old sexual fantasies. There will be times when it's just not working. You don't feel like doing it. And that's actually where you start to get the insights. That's actually an insight to learn. And that can be something that you can really integrate. This has a lasting effect on your relationship with your mind and your sexual energies. So don't underestimate this stuff. This is powerful stuff. And if you do 20 minutes a day, every day for a week, you're going to see big changes in your sexual energies. Now, of course, also this does assume that you're not seeing anyone. If you've got a partner at the moment and you're having regular sex, well, that's a little bit different. Because what you should probably do is probably talk with your partner. You should probably say, hey, let's have a conversation. I want to try this thing. And actually, that's really a different topic for us to go into. That's another conversation for another day, which is how you actually bring your sexual energies consciously to your relationship. But if you're not seeing someone, then this is great for you. If you're not seeing someone, you might be sexually frustrated. In this case, you need to be using these sorts of techniques. And really, this is hardcore stuff. This is really lasting stuff. And if you did it for a whole week and you really pull it off, your whole composition is going to change. Your whole idea of sexual feelings coming on or testosterone spikes coming on, your whole reaction to that is going to change. The whole process, the whole thinking behind it, the dialogue you have behind it, the behaviors that you do before, during, and after it, what it leads you to do, how it affects the rest of your day. And you'll find it's so much easier for you to then actually do your no-fap challenge, to actually not masturbate. And also to free up your mind for, well, more creative things, productive things, the things that normally you would want to work with. Because normally you have a testosterone spike and it comes and goes. But the funny thing about the mind is, particularly if you're screwing it over with porn, it can keep going all day. It can go non-stop. It can go all day, all night, non-stop. It can get stuck in this one thing over and over again. So when you have your testosterone spike and you have your arousal each day, whenever it is at each time by each amount, you come into it, you peak, and then you go out of it. And usually, if you're, well, I hope not usually, but if you're messing with your mind, then the mind has something that goes along with that, and it gets stuck in that space. And the testosterone chemicals have gone long before the mind continues doing its mess. And this is just not understanding the relationship between the mind and the body, the biological processes and how they feel and what they mean for the mind. So do this technique, do this, and really go deep into it and see the differences for yourself. Find your own differences. Find your own insights. Find your own ways of explaining what is happening to you. If you want to go the extra mile, write about this in your journal. If you're writing a journal each day, say what has happened. Now, it can be that you are actually using a journal and you're writing in it, oh, I'm always sexually frustrated. I'm always having this mind fucking, or I can't stop my mind from having these things happen, go on and around again and again. And if you're writing those sort of things, then you can actually use this technique to work with that, to actually deal with the issues. At least now, by writing about it in your journal, you've identified it as a real issue, as something you want to change. So supplementary journal entries is definitely recommended. Now, there is a further way to, there is a hardcore mode for this meditation. And this is for those really advanced practitioners. This is for the ones who really want to nip this in the bud once and for all, as they say. They want to resolve this thing deeply at its deepest level. And that is, you sit down and you do it non-stop, continuously, for as long as possible. Now, if you're coming from a certain place of frustration, that can be a long time. That can be a very long time. And there can be a lot of mind fucking before you actually start to see through the illusion, before you start to crack into the difference between the mind and the feeling in the body. And in fact, if you're sort of beginner, then it just doesn't work. You're not quite ready for that. And that's why we put the time limit on it. That's why we say 20 minutes only, because we're trying to really compartmentalize it so that it's clear for you. So if you're more advanced and you really want to go for it, you can go without a time limit. And in that case, you say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have all of my sexual fantasies that I've ever had, and I'm going to have them again and again as intensely as possible until they're all gone. I'm going to do this until I've resolved the issue. I'm going to do this until it's done. And if you set aside a couple of hours for that, or even more, you set aside a whole day, then you can make very deep progress in a short space of time. And this is so powerful. This is really taking an issue head on. Because in meditation, well, sometimes, think of it this way, sometimes in meditation you get given a technique, such as watch the breath or come back to the witness or just let things be. And if you're doing those, what can happen is, well, a sexual fantasy would come up. And then you've got this thing that you're trying to deal with, which is your sexual fantasy, and you're sort of just trying to deal with it by stepping off back into the technique, but you're not confronting it head on. You're not really actually having something that can deal with that thing. And that's why this technique is so powerful. That's why this technique is specific, no doubt. This is not a general meditative practice. It's really something that once you've learnt, once you've done it, once you've got it, then it's part of your toolkit, and you don't need to do it again and again. You'll notice that some meditations are for the path. They're for walking the path, and you do those for the rest of your life. Other meditations, like, well, for example, sunset meditation. That was another example of a meditative technique which you only need to do a few times to get in touch with. You can go back and listen to my explanation on that as well, if you'd like. There are also some principles to meditation in that episode, in that conversation. But this is one of those. Forced arousal meditation is one of those. Because when you've really gone deep into it, once you've done it either for a week or you've done this hardcore mode for a whole day, what'll happen is the old things will come up again, and you'll feel differently about them. Old experiences, old triggers, old biological processes, old thoughts. And how it's different, I don't want to say too much about, because now I'm feeding you what to expect too much. Now I'm saying too much of what a result you would want. I mean, really, you have to find it for yourself. So let me just leave it at that. Let me just say that that's enough, that how you feel about how you think will be different, and how you think will be different. But that's not to say that the old things won't come up. You know, the old things will come up. That's actually part of the integration process, is when you encounter something old and you see it as something that has changed, something that's in a different space. And another component of having this under your belt, another component of having this as a part of your spiritual toolkit, is that you can actually use it again, which means that you can say, oh, I feel like having some sexual energies. Allow me to go into, consciously, a sexual fantasy. If I want to feel good, then I can consciously go into that. I can actually choose to do that. And you can do that without masturbating. You can do that without becoming frustrated. You can do that without it leading to impulsive behaviors, destructive behaviors. And it's just all around better. Like, how much more do I need to say to sell this to you? Like, it's really just an incredible... It's just an incredible technique, which is so powerful. And it gets at something so fundamental. I mean, you have to integrate your sexuality. That's so important. So to recap, 20 minutes alone, eyes closed, plenty of space for getting it up. And whatever it takes, you make yourself aroused. You make yourself have an erection. And the times when it doesn't work or it's not working will bring you insight. And even the times when it is working will bring you insight. And to iterate again, this is for intermediate to advanced meditative practitioners. This is not for beginners. So if you're a beginner, have some time without porn have some time with just a basic meditation. Basic meditation would be just 20 minutes, eyes closed, do nothing. Just see whatever happens. Just sit quietly, stop talking for 20 minutes. That's enough. There's enough in that which you will need to deal with. Enough will come into that you will need to deal with. That will keep you busy for some time. That will bring you into some experiences. So thanks very much for listening. It's been great to share this with you. I've had great experiences. I've had great experiences and great results from this technique myself. And you can also go and listen to the other things that have been said on this topic, which I've said before. There's now many hours of information. So if you want to know more, the information is there. Thanks very much for tuning in. And that's all I have to say for now.